Dear traveler, this has been a hard year, perhaps the hardest of my life. In 2020, I have felt more lost than ever, far from where I should be, far from the people that I love. Sometimes the only thing that felt like it was changing was time, passing me by sluggish and hypnotizing, but also somehow gone before I could remember it. I think that is why I have self-indulged this year more than others. I hope you'll allow me one final indulgence as we enter the new year. Let me tell you a story. When I was a child, I used to sneak out at night. I learned how to avoid all the creaking spots on the stairs and how to silence the jingling bells my mom had wrapped around the doorknob. Then I'd step off the porch onto the cool midnight ground and walk. Traditionally, in these types of stories, I would then tell you I was meeting a crush or going to a party, but I was never that kind of kid. Too quiet and awkward in my own skin. Instead, I would walk over to my aging swing set and sit in the now too small rubber swing and look up at the stars. That's the advantage of living where few people want to be. You can always see the stars in the sky. They say there are two reactions to seeing the stars. Either they remind you of the expanse of the universe and the insignificance of your life, and that frightens you, or they remind you of the expanse of the universe and the insignificance of your life, and that comforts you. I think the reality is we've probably felt both at different times of our lives. After all, we all want to matter to someone, and we all want our problems to pass. There is a third reaction, though, one where you look up at the stars and think not of the universe, but of other people, small and insignificant like you, looking up, and you feel a little less alone. Every once in a while, you read a book at exactly the right time. You read a story that sees the doors you are building in yourself, the ones you might not even know about, and open them. I think that is why I loved Neil Gaiman's Stardust so much when I was younger. In this story, there is a character who stared up at the stars as I did when I was young. He said it seemed to him that they were dancers, stately and graceful. He imagined he could see the stars smiling gently as if they had spent so much time above the world, watching the scrambling and the joy and the pain of the people below them, that they could not help but be amused every time another little human believed itself the center of its world, as each of us does. Sometimes, when it was late at night and I was feeling very lonely and small, I would swing on my old playset and imagine the stars were swaying with me, dancing in some far-off place. I would talk to them then, whispering my wishes, sharing my sorrows. So when I read Neil Gaiman's words, I felt for a moment a little less alone. I reread Stardust recently, sitting in a little cabin in the middle of nowhere, one that, like my home, was veiled in stars each night. It wasn't how I remembered it. The story, I mean. The stars were still the same, but somewhere in my memory, I'd replaced the written and movable version of Neil Gaiman's book with something else. Stories are like that, though. They never really stay the same. That's life, too. You change sometimes without even knowing it. You take the parts that resonate with you and discard the rest. I didn't remember all the ways Stardust was interwoven with old fairy stories, or how the book concerned little of itself with characters understanding each other. I just remembered the star in a new hostile world with no way to get home. After all, how can you fall from such great heights, pick yourself up, and put yourself back in the sky. As I read the book again, I felt the impossibility of this task more keenly. In 2020, I know I was not the only one with my head tilted up to the stars, wishing for something better, wishing to be anywhere but where I was. And remembering that made me feel less alone. And remembering that made me think of how far away so many of us are from what we are wishing for. How many of us are, like the star, looking up at the night sky and longing for what seems impossible? In the city, I don't see many stars. Most days, I don't see any at all. And I know it's silly and a bit romantic to think this way, but I miss their guidance. Now when these moods strike, I find myself inside, reading something and trying to forget. But of course, the magic of reading is you never know when you'll find a story that comes just when you need it most. It was as I was finishing Stardust that I turned to the author's blog and found there, just as the minute hand turned to midnight, January 1st, a New Year's message. Neil Gaiman revealed he had noticed the darkness too in 2020. He'd felt the weight of it, the grief, and the loss. Then, on the darkest nights, he would look up, and there were the stars, as bright and as abundant as ever. At the end of the message, Neil Gaiman makes a wish. He wrote, "Hold on. Hang on by the skin of your teeth if you have to. Make arts, or whatever you make, if you can make it. But if all you can manage is to get out of bed in the morning, then do that and be proud of what you managed, not frustrated by what you haven't. Remember, you aren't alone, no matter how much it feels like it sometimes. And never forget that sometimes it's only when it gets really dark that we can see the stars." So, that is my story. Maybe not so much a story as a diary, but as we head into the new year, I have one more thing to share. January gets its name from Janus, the god of doorways and the passage of time. Maybe that is why we always look to the future as we step from one year to another. Like we can enter new rooms in ourselves, ones that we did not even know we'd been building. Maybe we are all building our doors in some ways, and sometimes those doors lead you back to places you'd forgotten just when you need it. And sometimes they're preparing you to go somewhere new. Now, as we enter the new year, I have a wish for you. I hope that you revisit what gives you comfort, and that gives you the strength to do something new. That you know that even when you feel stuck, you are building doors for yourself. And that you remember when you feel alone to look up at the stars.